on the building process of going into Pesach. A lot of it, like every year, you got to have some type of a study. You know what I'm saying? Like every year, you got to have like something that you say, "Hey, I'm gonna." Some people do the same thing. Like some people have a tradition of learning Masechet Pesakim, right? So there's people who do that. A lot of yeshiva people do that, and so they'll just start learning the sefer from now all the way till Pesach. They'll do like a siyum on time of Pesach. I don't know how that all works out timing wise, but that's what some people they have that, right? So you have that, and what, but whatever. But the thing is that the learning mechanism is a way to bring down lights, right? So there's a specific light that exists right now in the universe, which is a light that is a preparation for Pesach, right? In that same building process to Pesach, we see it in the Torah, right? We see it inside of the different the makot, the plagues, all the things that happen. We see that there was a building process to get to this point. The death of the firstborn and these types of things, right? Were all big concept, humongous conversations between God, between Moses. So that same powerful energy of discussion and clarity is happening right now, right? So as much as a person feels like, oh, well, I'm preparing for Pesach. No, you are preparing your vessel, right? And every year, for me, right, for every year, there's something new. There's always consistent things like the halakha. We already started, we already opened up with Pesakim, and we started learning about this idea of, looking for, the chametz the night before, right? So we started the process, but we're diving into a frame of leadership, right? And we want to think about leadership as much as possible in all these different ways. And wow, Hashem reveals to us, Hashem reveals to us this whole concept, right? Like Hashem reveals this whole concept, which is Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs in blessed memory, and this whole thing. So that's where we're at right now. We're banging out on that, and so now we're in Parsha Toledot, and let's get into it. Okay. Yeah, so we're in Parsha Toledot, right? Okay, and it's the price of silence. So again, we're in this dynamic of that, and just a quick recap: we were in Parsha Va'era before that, and before that Lech Lecha, and these two last parshiot have taught us really powerful aspects of leadership, right? And it's all based around the life of Avraham Avinu, right? In Abraham and him, breaking boundaries, him stepping up to the plate, him taking responsibility, him accepting he has a purpose. These types of things are all humongously important, right? And so now we're in Parsha Todot, and we'll see what's going to say. So he says the Netziv, which is Raphael Zev Yehuda Berlin, right? It was kind of like his nickname, dean of the yeshiva in Volozhin, made a sharp observation that Isaac and Rebecca, right, when Parsha Todot, Isaac and Rebecca seem not to have communicated closely. Okay, so this is stop for 1 second. I just want to really go back to this one idea that we learned prior, right? And the idea that we learned prior was this idea that even though God made these promises to Abraham, right? He promised him this land. He promised him, uh, his offspring was be as numerous as the stars. And Rabbi Hirsch points out that, yeah, God made these promises, but it required him to make that connection, right? It required him to still make connections. What are the connections? So God said, okay, I'm going to give you this holy land, but he still had to purchase the property, right? And now and it came through his wife dying, right? And God tells him, oh, well, you're going to have all these huge offspring, all these whole lineage. but he has to figure out a way to get Abraham married. I mean, to get Yitzhak married, right? So now this process of the continuation of those promises of God to Abraham, now we're seeing the manifestation of it. So this rabbi, the Netziv, right, who lived in 1816 to 1893, he says a point. He says that there seems like there was a communication issue between Isaac and Rebekah, right? And he says it seems not communicated closely. Rebecca's relationship with Isaac was not the same as that between Sarah and Abraham or Rachel and Jacob. When they had, he says, when they had a problem, they were not afraid to speak it out. Not so with Rebecca. It says the Netziv senses this distance from the very moment when Rebecca sees Isaac meditating in the field. He says, at which point she covered herself with a veil. He comments, she covered herself out of awe, a sense of inadequacy, as if she felt she was unworthy to be his wife. And from then on, his trepidation was fixed in her mind. Their relationship suggested the Netziv was never casual, candid, and communicative. He said the result was at a series of critical moments, a failure of communication. It seemed likely that Rebecca never informed Isaac of the oracle she had before the twins, meaning that revelation that she had, right? That one will serve the other until he says, and she never told Isaac. So it's an interesting point. So the Torah starts this whole concept with Rebecca and Isaac being married, and we hear about the whole process with Lavan and Eliezer, but we're talking about when they're married, and she gives birth. She's pregnant, right? And so she has this huge thing where the Midrashim says maybe she went to some high priest, or maybe she had prophecy, whatever it was, and she was told that she has two nations inside of her, and the youngest would lead the eldest. So they're saying here that she never told Isaac about that experience, right? That's a really big idea, right? Because that's a huge thing. So she never told him that, right? So it seems likely that Rebecca never informed Isaac of the oracle that she had before the twins. Isaac and Jacob were born in which God told her the elder would serve the younger. That apparently is one reason she loved Jacob rather than Esau. She says, knowing that he was the chosen one by God, if Isaac knew this, why did he favor Esau? He probably did not know because Rebekah did not tell him. That is why many years later, when she heard Isaac was about to receive when she heard that Isaac is about to bless Esau, she is forced into a plan of deception. She tells Jacob to pretend he is Esau. Why did she not just simply tell Isaac that it was Jacob who was to be blessed? These are great questions, no? I know you already thought about it. Anyways, but he says, because that would force her to admit that she had kept herself in ignorance about the prophecy for all these years the children were growing up. This is big stuff, no? This is massive. So he says he had spoken to Isaac on the day of the blessing. Isaac might have said something that would have changed the entire course of their children's lives. I imagine Isaac saying this. Of course, I know that it will be Jacob and not Esau who will continue the covenant. But I have two quite different blessings in mind, one for each of our sons. I will give the blessing of the wealth and power. I will give Esau the blessing of wealth and power. May God give you the dew of the heaven and the richness of the earth. Many nations will serve you, and people will bow down to you. And I will give Jacob the blessing God gave to Abraham and to me, the blessing of children in the promised land. He says, may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of people. May he give you your descendants and blessings given to Abraham, so you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, and the land God gave to Abraham. Isaac never did intend to give the blessing of the covenant to Esau. He intended to give each child the blessings that suit him. So this is interesting. So from this perspective, right? She's saying that Isaac was going to give the correct blessings, right? She came in, and so she said, so he says, and he intended to give each child a blessing that suited them. The entire deceit planned by Rivka and carried out by Jacob was never necessary in the first place. Why did Rivka not understand this? Because she and her husband did not communicate. This is huge. He says, let us know, let us know. He said, now let us count the consequences Isaac, the old and the blind, feel betrayed by Jacob. The terrible violently when he raised what he had happened, saying to Esau, your brother came deceitfully. Esau likewise feels betrayed and feels like such hatred towards God that he vowed to kill him. Rebekah is forced to send Jacob to exile, thus depriving herself for more than 2 decades of his company, of the son she loved. So her deceit took away what she loved the most, right? As for Jacob, the consequences of deceit last a lifetime, resulting in strife between his wives and between his children. Few and evil have been the days of my life, he says to Pharaoh as an old man. Four lives, four lives are scarce by one act. Four lives are scarred by one act, which is not even necessary in the first place. Isaac did in fact give Jacob a blessing of Abraham, without any deception, knowing him to be Jacob and not Esau. Such is the human price we pay for the failure to communicate. The Torah is exceptionally candid about such matters, which makes it so powerful at the guide of life. It says he says the Torah is exceptionally candid about such powers, which makes it so powerful a guide to life amongst real people with real problems. So he's saying the Torah is like a real thing. Yes, we go into the supernatural. That's how divine this book is. We have this, and we have the Kabbalah, and it's all in the same text. This is the greatness of God's message. This is how, when we bless the Torah in the morning, before we learn Torah, we have to say the blessing, right? This is what we're saying to open our minds and be able to experience that. Okay, so it says communication matters. He says, in the beginning, God created the natural world with words. The God said, let there be light. We create social worlds with words. The Targum translate the phrase "a man became a living soul," as as in man became a speaking soul. So I guess that's where Rav Ashlag gets the speaking part from. Anyways, for us, speech is life. Life is relationship. The human relationship only exists because we can speak. We can tell other people our hopes, our fears, our feelings, and thoughts. He said, this is why any leader, from a parent to a CEO, must set his or her task good, strong, honest, and open communication. This is what makes families. This is what makes families. It's funny. Yeah, okay, anyways. This is what makes families, teams, and corporate cultures healthy. People need to know what their overall aims are in a team, what their specific roles are, what responsibilities they carry, and what values and behaviors they are expected to exemplify. There must be a praise for those who dwell, as well as constructive criticism. When people do badly, criticism must be of an act and not the person. A person must feel respected, whatever his or her failures. This is the last feature. This last feature is one of the fundamental differences between a guilt morality. All right, this is one of the last feature of the fundamental difference between guilt morality, which Judaism is supreme example, and shame morality, which is that of the ancient Greece. Guilt makes a clear distinction between the act and the person. Shame does not. Interesting. Okay, so that's a very very important thing in leadership, right? Because communication is going to create critique, right? You're going to listen to what people are saying, or listen to what's saying, and you're going to maybe at times pick up that they're doing things improperly, right? And so and so oftentimes that could lead to critique and sometimes criticism, right? So what he's saying here, he's making the distinctions of two different frameworks: guilt morality and shame morality, right? And he says the difference is that guilt creates a distinction between the action and the person. So I feel bad not because I'm a bad person. I feel bad because I did this. Shame is I'm ashamed of who I am. He says there are times when such depends on clear communication. It is not too much to say that there was a moment at which the fate of the world depended on it. It happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 when the United States and the Soviet Union were on the brink of nuclear war. The height of the crisis, as described by Robert McNara, whatever, in the film the Fog of War, John Kennedy received two messages from the Soviet Union leader, Nikolai Khrushchev, and he says, and one was consolatory, and the other was more hawkish. Most of Kennedy's advisors believe that the second presented Khrushchev's real view and should be taken seriously. Okay, so there's all right, we get it. He says, however, one man, Eli Thomas Jr. Had been an American ambassador to the Soviet Union from 1957 to 1962, and had become to know the Russian president well. He had even spent a period of time living with Khrushchev and his wife. He told Khrushchev that the cautionary message sounded like Khrushchev's own personal view, while the hawkish letter, which did not sound like him, had probably been written to appease the Russian general. Kennedy listened to Thomas and gave Khrushchev a way of backing down without losing face. He and the result was the war was averted. It is terrifying to imagine what might have happened had Thomas not been aware, had not been there to establish what was and what to establish what which was and which was not the real action of communication. Parents and leaders must establish culture which in honest, respectful, open, respectful communication takes place, and one does not involve is not involved in speaking but also listening. Without it, tragedies is writing in the wings. All right, so this is like a very big concept and a very big topic. I just want to talk about for a second. So the thing is like this: communication, right? And I'm going to use an example of relationships, right? So let's take the relationship with kids and parents, right? And this is a very powerful concept I learned from actually a lady who's a writer here in Israel. And about, she wrote a book about people leaving Judaism, like going off the dare. right? And she interviewed a lot of people, talked to different rabbis, all these types of things, right? And the thing is, she told me about a conversation she had with a particular rabbi who she said wasn't one of the most impressive rabbis out of all the people she met with. You know, she met with all these big names and this type of thing, right? And so he said in passing, not about an issue when it comes to people, leaving Torah or not leaving Torah, but he talked about something issue. He talked about relationships. And he said when kids are young, right? When kids are young, it's about giving direction, right? Creating order, creating structure, right? When kids are younger. But when kids get older, it's about negotiation, right? You have to negotiate with the kid, right? And she said that the reason why that's important is because if a parent doesn't make that transition with the psychology of that child, they will lose that child in their teen years because they still didn't make that transition. The parent is still trying to give directions to now with this child that's like formulating his adult mind or her adult mind, right? And he says, so you have to transition when they're, past bar mitzvah age or bar mitzvah to this frame of negotiating where you don't tell them. And so the example that she gave me was her daughter, right? And she said her daughter's like this like very attractive girl, young girl, but very attractive, tall, thin, the whole thing. She's just like really long, like model type legs. And and she said that, her daughter used to dress like kind of like, very revealing. Her daughter grew up in like kind of like secular Israeli culture. I mean, they were traditional, but pretty much like in a secular system in many ways. And she did that, and that was a process, right? And so as she got older, when she was younger, it was like cute, but as she got older, she's getting attention of older men. And so she said, instead of telling her, you got to dressing more modest, you got to do this, she said, look at like how like beautiful and long your legs are. She just said to her one day, they were looking at her Instagram. And she was saying, at the same time, you're so brilliant. Your mind is so advanced, you're so clever, right? And so she said to her daughter, she said, like, you have these long legs, and it's like, what a shame that every time you walk in a room, that's the only thing people will notice about you, right? And they never get to know like who you are, like who I think it's Tali or something, like what Tali's thinking is, right? And because of that, her daughter said, "You're right, mom." And over time, her daughter wanted to be more respected when she walked in the room. She didn't want people just looking at her body parts. She wanted to be more respected. But she used that as an example of negotiation, right? Now the thing is, and this is communication. This is really high level communication. Now this thing that the marriage, right? Now the challenge is like this: when a guy is dating a girl, most of the time, he's usually the one setting the tone, right? The guy has to marry the girl. He has to propose. He decides, right? The woman decides marriage, right? And the man decides who he's willing to what he's willing to pay for it in order to get to marriage, right? For the non-Jews, it's just intimacy, right? But by us, it's marriage, right? And so the thing is, in the beginning, it's very similar of a relationship where the man says, "Hey, we're going to go out here. Let's go out here." He invites the girl out. She accepts, right? He pays for the field. He's in control. He tells her he wants to get engaged. She has to accept. He says, he sets the time, marriage, the whole thing, ketubah, right? So he's in this place of creating the direction. And the woman generally, and especially in kosher dating, women are very much in their best behavior, right? Because there's matchmakers, shadchanim involved, there's rabbis, sometimes family members. I know people's families when people went out on dates, like the family would literally come together praying. They're praying that it all works out well. It's the right thing. Like it's such a big concept with dating. We don't even realize in the States, right? But they're like, it's like a big thing. Like people going to Kevarako. Like I know rabbis I would run into at different places. Like, yeah, our son's out on a date or my daughter's on a date, so we came here to pray, you know? So this is the type of stuff, right? And so, but after the marriage, the woman is, in her home, right? She's expressing herself. And so that dynamic changes, right? How she expresses herself changes, right? And so that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge is now he's not directing her anymore. He's not saying this is the way things are. He can have that dynamic. But the progression in that relationship is getting into a place of negotiation, right? And part of negotiation is listening. And so another person told me something in this matter. Who told me this? I think it was a rabbi. This was Rabbi Schaff in Los Angeles. He was talking to me about chinuk, raising children. And I think it was him. I'm saying in his name. I don't know. I think it was him who told me this. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but he said to me he was talking about raising kids, and he was talking about his wife, and his wife like having no, she just knows things about certain things with raising children that she learned as a young girl, right? And so the point is saying that the point is just saying that he told me that it's really important when you have your kids to create a culture in the house that when you go to bed, that when the kid goes to bed, you sit with the kid and you just ask the kid how their day was, what happened, everything, and you just listen. You just listen to them. Let them talk. This happened, Billy. This. You don't judge. You don't say you were wrong for this, or you don't. You just listen, right? You just listen, right? If something you hear is a problematic, you can bring it up at a different time, in a different type of way, because you want the kid to feel safe, right? That they're not going to be judged. And he says if you do that in the early development years, you build a relationship where the kid becomes very natural with sharing with you what's going on. It's normal for them to share and to communicate what's going on, right? And so these are just a few just small ideas, things that I picked up. But the main thing I think out of this aspect of Toledot and this idea of Rebecca and Isaac is seeing how important it is for communication and how important it is to be honest and how important it is to be vulnerable because like just imagine if she never bro, we don't even know. I mean, and now I'm questioning was it even prophecy? That's where I'm at now. Anyways, and I'm not trying to go in it, but I'm just saying like, hey, God had to tell Abraham to listen to his wife. Anyways, all right. So let's some thoughts, reflections.
Yeah, that's a viewpoint I've never explored before between Isaac Avino and Rika. That's very interesting. Breaking down communication and how important communication is. And I think that's one thing I have to focus on is because I think I have an ability to communicate very well, but sometimes I can over communicate because my mind is so it just starts plumbing through depths of different tone and reflections and boom boom boom. Like I'm just naturally like that. So sometimes it's better for me to not say so much and just listen, but just expressing, how important it is to communicate between husband and wife, between friends, between student and teacher. I mean, Hakadosh Baruch Hu created the world through speech, the building blocks of foundation, how important our speech is. So it's a very, interesting viewpoint. I kind of want to meditate on.
You gotta meditate on it, huh?
Yeah, because I was like, what? I mean, it's not like, whoa, it's just like, I mean, I haven't thought about it like that. You know what I mean? Like, she never did tell. I always kind of wondered why she didn't tell Yitzhak. And I guess I kind of, you know what, when I think about it, didn't Yitzhak not tell Yaakov that he knew Yosef was still alive? And he felt like because Hashem didn't tell Yaakov, it wasn't Yitzhak's place to tell him. Are you familiar with that commentary, Rob?
That that you're saying that. Yaakov didn't tell Yosef. I
No,
mean, Yaakov.
Yitzhak knew that Yosef was alive, but he never told Yaakov. Like the whole time he knew. I think through Ruach HaKodesh. I wonder if that's like connected to what Rabbi Sachs just brought up, Lord Rabbi Sachs. What he just brought out in terms of Rivka not communicating to Esau. But then Esau did the same thing, not communicating to Yaakov. So I wonder if it's just something deeper, some understanding there, you know?
I'm not sure. I want to look into it, but I'm not sure Yosef was born when Yitzhak died. Because remember, Yosef was born when he was at Laban's house,
Hmm.
and his father was still alive then. When did Yitzhak die?
Mm, because when Esau, because I remember Yosef asking his brothers when they came together, like, "How's your aged father?" And
Yeah, but
and
he's talking
then
about Yaakov though. He's talking about
he's talking about
Yaakov.
Yaakov, but then the brothers kind of, I thought the way they responded let him know that Yaakov is fine, but Esau is no longer here. And then Yosef went and what for Esau? I have to look into it. Where exactly that commentary is, who brought it out, and where is it in the Torah? I have to look into it because I remember why did he? What was the reason? I was trying to think what was the reason and why. No, maybe it's in the Midrash says. Let me see. But it's just an interesting point. I'm kind of thinking like he's talked and Rick I think communicate. I just wonder if it's a connection to it, but all the same, um, yeah, it's intriguing. Intriguing. Because if they would have, and if she would have told him, it's like yo, Esau was gonna do this anyway. So
How do you spell Isaac in English?
Isaac. Um, uh,
Let me do it. Hmm. It won't let me search on my computer. I don't know. I should know that. I know I should know that, but just right now it's not on my head. Anyways, the point is just saying that there's definitely a lot of connections there, and communication is key. Could you look that up for me? I'm just like so curious, and I can't look it up. When did Isaac die?
yeah, that's what I'm looking at too. I'm in a. I picked up the Midrash says.
No, you don't do the
I'm looking
midrash. Just
for it.
Google it. Just Google it.
Cool.
What does it say?
It just gave me like when he passed, but it didn't give me like what I'm trying to look for. So I changed
But
it.
what parsha though? What parsha?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It didn't even give me a partial because I'm gonna go through Kabad maybe. Uh,
People are like, you're a rabbi. You should know when Isaac died. Okay, I can't think of it right now. I got a lot of Torah in my head. I got a lot of Torah in my head.
Watching. Okay, I mean Kabad. See the questions.
I'm thinking when you Google when did Isaac die, what does it say?
It just says that he died at 180 years old. He died in Hebron. His sons were Yaakov and Esau. It doesn't really go into like the power shot of what we're looking
Mm.
for.
It doesn't. It
I guess
doesn't.
I think
I think it's probably saying that it doesn't say when Isaac dies in the Torah explicitly, but the Midrashim probably says. But then
mm,
you think the Midrashim will bring it up though when it comes up on the. Anyway, this in this year. Pretty much today, Monday. So tonight
mm.
I should be on. I really want to get through this leadership series, so it's really important. So if you want, we could do tonight as well too.
Okay.
But this, I'm staying on this topic. All right, Baruch atah Adonai leolam.